and roots.
As a botanist, I'm always intrigued by plants and humans influencing each other. I like to think of plants on the same level, kind of like characters. And the wild rice is a tenacious one. You can try to tame her, but she'll always be a little wild. You can go to the store and pick up all kinds of rice varieties from around the world, but native wild rice? That can be a little tricky to find. The only cereal grain native to North America. Wild rice is a food source, an economy, and a plant that has shaped entire communities of people living around the Great Lakes.
That's part of our migration story. The Ojibwe, the Anishinaabe, migrated this way to where the food grows on water, and that's what we're here, and that's what we're using.
My husband and I connected with members of the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe. They were kind enough to share the experience of harvesting wild rice. Okay. They call it monomen.
And it means the good seed? Is that correct?
Yep, good berry.
Gary Charwood has been a cultural coordinator for many years, maintaining and teaching the traditions of the Ojibwe.
There's no standing around.
He shared with us that everything living has a spirit, and so when you take from the forest or the water, it's as if taking from a relative. It is important to ask permission and give thanks.
Did you see that guy that was out there yesterday and just hit it, and he broke the stalk? When you break the stalk, you kill the plant.
So if you're not gentle with it, you lose all that good rice. If you're not knocking it gently, or if you're using motorized boats, any kind of breakage means that you're losing good seed. So I'm going to be doing the polling. So you push, use the leverage.
Have you done this before?
No, I haven't.
I've been partnered with Cal, a kind, quiet guy who I later learn is always stuck with the newbies. He is an educator who teaches the Ojibwe language and culture. They've harvested this rice their whole lives, and they know the ecology intimately. They know that the rice is both fragile and resilient.
You can never predict rice. It's sensitive. A good rain will rise up a few inches, and that would pull it all the roots.
Meaning that just even a little bit of rain could uproot it.
Yeah.
It's susceptible to fluctuating water levels and strong winds and careless harvesters who are too rough with it. But it's also super adaptive. The grains don't ripen all at the same time for a reason. Say a big storm comes through early in the season and knocks off a bunch of green seed. Well, it will continue to set mature seed over the course of several weeks, which ensures its lineage and also means that these guys can harvest over the span of several weeks.
You want to just knock the ripe stuff out, keep the green stuff that's still developing. That'll ripen up and you come back again even days after. How you doing, Ash?
Great, this is awesome.
You like it?
I mean, my arms are getting to work out, but this is incredible.
You look around and everyone looks like they're gliding on a dry prairie. It's a magical optical illusion. There's the bright hot sun, the pole digging into the muck, feeling like it will break in two, but it never does. You start to feel the rhythm. You set a tempo and the knocker can match it. Left hand over right, over left, over right.
Blackbirds, we don't see them no more. They would always take you to the right price. You just have to follow them birds, and maybe in the past 20 years they've been disappearing more and more. Yeah. So it's all different types of grain, different tastes. People don't realize it's all different from every lake to lake. It's a taste. To me, it's our best tasting. You know.
It's our third week straight ricing.
The rising's only here for a short time, and you need to get out and get it.
Trying to get enough food for
the year.
The year to feed our family.
So at what age did you start ricing?
12 years old, 1972.
What was it like back then?
There used to be a lot of people. Landings used to be filled up with cars, lined up, and so you had to carry your boat for a long ways just to get to the landing.
So there's just not many people doing it
No.
nowadays.
Why is that?
Boats are expensive. Canoes are expensive. And the ones that keep doing it are the ones that have had their boats for a long time. Actually, like my grandson, I've been racing with them for the past few years, and one's joined the army, and one is would rather just work than come out here. So,
Has it ever been like a substantial income
no,
for you or anybody that you know?
no, it's just more of a cultural thing. And you know, they raised the price to like $6 a pound. So these guys in this rice bed, they're gonna wind up with maybe a good $1,000 today.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry I'm holding you back.
No,
now.
no. For your first time, you're a really good rice, really good quality.
Oh, thank you.
These beautiful seeds of tan and green and burgundy, they each have a tail or an awn. This tail guides the seed down into the water where it anchors itself into the muck. It'll stay submerged through the icy winter, but as the sun melts the ice in spring, light and warmth penetrate to the bottom of the lake and the seeds germinate. What's crazy to me is that even when Mother Nature gives too much water or too little water, the seeds will just wait, sometimes years, until the water level is equalized. There's a wisdom in knowing that nature is not static. We often fight that sentiment, but I admire cultures like the Ojibwe, who in being so close to the land see that survival happens in tandem with the cycles of nature, not despite it.
Now the work begins.
As beautiful as it is to see a native edible plant be appreciated and distributed amongst the local community, I can't help but feel a little frustrated, maybe. The fact that I can't go to the grocery store where I live and pick it up kind of just bothers me. All this rice from around the world available to me, and yet I won't be able to find this rice, and with twice the protein of brown rice.
For me, it's having a rice dish with nuts and all fresh berries like blueberries and raspberries, any fresh fruit, and then with maple syrup on it. Yeah. And some secret spices.
Yeah. I love how versatile it is, like where it can be sweet or savory,
Right.
breakfast, lunch, dinner.
And it's the most nutritious grain on the earth.
What does it take for a plant to become as ubiquitous as corn and wheat and soy? Canoe is a fourth-generation processing facility. After wild rice is harvested, it has to undergo a few steps to make it consumable. The first step is curing.
Wow.
So this whole system is basically like our receiving and curing. Each level holds 100,000 pounds. The bottom's open, so it's turned every day. The elevator brings it up to the top and drop.
And that's just to keep it rotated.
Yep.
And
Yeah, you don't want it sitting.
yeah.
And then it ends up in here, and this is where they're taking it to the processing room.
The next step of processing is parching.
So those are natural gas-fired parchers.
The smell is intense. It smells like grass, but nutty.
So 600 pounds goes in, about 300 pounds comes out.
It smells wonderful.
Like this rice here, White Earth Reservation just dropped this off. Actually, that trailer's full, that trailer's full. I mean, their lakes are doing really well this year. But they like to keep it as traditional as possible, so this all gets wood parched.
Many people bring their rice here to be processed, including native people, non-native people, and wild rice growers. It might sound like an oxymoron, but some wild rice is cultivated. And believe it or not, California produces the most cultivated wild rice.
So this is Canadian lake rice. This is harvest. There's nobody that hand picks up there anymore. It's all picked with airboats.
Oh, wow.
So usually Canadian rice has a much larger grain size.
So there's wild rice and cultivated wild rice.
I'm still trying to understand like the wild rice versus cultivated rice. What species are we talking about?
They're all the same species. Cultivated rice is just like plant science wise. I mean, they're just doing breeding. You know, you're selecting, like even one of the farmers, Kelly Petrosky, he found a plant that he liked, you know, it was a purple in color. So he was collecting, and there were some characteristics he liked. So then he had a little test patty, and sure enough, he came up with his own seed variety.
Okay.
But that's all, I mean, wild rice, it's not genetically modified. It's still, even if they got it in a patty, it reverts back to its wild state.
Oh, okay.
So
it's hard to stabilize it into any kind of cultivar.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And it's all Zizania palustris?
I believe so.
The lake rice,
Yes.
not the river rice.
Yes. I mean, 3 to 5 years of, being in a paddy environment, they usually rotate that crop out because it's going to start going back to its lake state.
So it seems like there is enough wild rice to go around if you're supplementing with cultivated wild rice. As Joe said, if someone wants wild rice, it's available. But outside of the Great Lakes, it's never really caught on in a big way. Maybe because of marketing or because of convenience? It isn't the quickest food to cook after all.
This is probably about the most convenient way to eat wild rice. My grandpa was the first one to start doing this. So all you do is drain it, heat it up, it's all done. I can't cook wild rice as good as this. You know how long it takes to cook dark wild rice? It's 60 minutes.
Yeah.
Before mechanization, all wild rice was wood parched by native people. Traditionally, it's part of the larger rhythm or dance of wild rice, where they cure it in the sun, roast it over an open fire, dance on the grains to remove the hulls, and then winnow the chaff away into the wind. And even though native people have adopted modern techniques, there are those who find the wood parching to be a non-negotiable part of the process.
So right now we are headed to go see Bruce Savage, who traditionally wood parches all of the rice. He's a member of the Fond du Lac band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, I believe. But he is kind of like a master parcher using wood fire, not natural gas. So he keeps it very, very traditional.
Down this way is where we do all the parching. This is probably the hardest way to do rice, is with wood fire parch. And we try to do our rice within 1 to 2 days that it comes off of the lake. And when you do it that way, the hull is still very strong. A lot of big plants like to let it sit for weeks or a week, however long they do it. Every rice finisher is like a beer or a winemaker or a miller. Everyone does it different. Historically, my family, we always, when we get home from ricing, we'd always start the process right away. And when you do it that way, like I said, that hull is very strong yet. So it's the hardest way to do rice. I didn't want to do this. This was something I was forced to do. After the 1960s and 50s, when commercialization of wild rice, it used to be just a staple diet for folks in this Great Lakes region. And then all of a sudden the commercialization came of it, and they started to have these big giant plants, and you would bring your rice there and it would have to sit for 2 weeks before you could get it in. That just wasn't the quality that I liked, or my family. So we built this plant here. You can taste the difference, and they'll argue it. All I gotta do is tell you, go try it. You tell me there isn't a difference in the flavor. I think it has to do with the fluctuations of temperature. When you have a constant heat, you don't get the caramelization that you would out of the fluctuation of temperature. That used to be a lake, and you can see the ditches that they dug in it to get it all the way down to the St. Louis River, so they had a reliable source of hydroelectricity. The guy that I bought this farm from used to have a boat down there when he was a kid, and it was rice and a beautiful sand bottom, and now you see it looks like a prehistoric lake.
Wow.
So that's in less than 100 years. That's what I think is the reason of the decline, is the change mostly of the hydrology, and lakeshore owners don't like rice. They think of it as a weed, and so they do everything they can to eliminate it in front of their beautiful little cabins.
So what's your feelings on wild beds versus cultivated beds? If we have to start intervening and cultivating it, is that a bad thing in your opinion?
Well, historically, I always say we always did cultivate rice. In our stories, they talk about how when we would find a body of water that didn't have rice, we'd reseed it. So to me, that's cultivation.
Yeah.
We just don't get the recognition for it as being native people. We've always replanted rice. You know, you'd find if you were living somewhere and you needed something that was a staple diet that would last, get you through the winters around the Great Lakes, and if you found a pond that looked desirable, you would plant it. So then you would have a food source.
Yes, you're sustaining it.
Now, there's a lot of families in our region that go out and harvest this annually so that they can have food for the winter.
So for some people it's income, but for some people they're using it as a food source directly.
Both.
Yeah.
You know, there's native families here for generations that have developed an income and created an economy off of wild rice. And now it's getting real popular, and it's getting very difficult to be able to keep that economy within Indian country. It's a limited resource. For some reason, people think that it's like everywhere and it's readily available. Well, the storm this morning probably knocked most of the lake and river rice in where the hail and stuff went through. And so if you get a bunch of people out there that are trying to buy it to be able to turn it and resell it, it's a very limited resource.
Yeah.
Wild versus paddy grown, hand harvested versus airboat harvested, gas parched versus wood parched. There seems to be a lot of opinions when it comes to the legitimacy of it all. And more than that, there's a tension there. That tension between conservation and agriculture, spiritualism and capitalism, local versus global needs. I'm left with a hell of a lot to think about. And then I look at her, the wild rice, her lithe stalks and millions of seeded progeny. What does she think of us? Probably that we need her more than she needs us. And I'd have to agree.